If you are trying to prepare for a VC interview in the next 2 weeks, I can tell you that you've already failed. And I think it's a tough, very critical answer, but to me, the business of venture, it is a relationship business.
Peter Saddington, your big game hunter. And guys, we have our sights on someone special
Only
today.
a mother could invest in this idea. What the hell?
Made this super artistic.
That is actually absolutely correct. And that's a very, very astute assessment, actually.
Welcome, everybody, to VC Hunting with me, your host, Peter Saddington. Guys, I am super excited for this fun conversation. We're big game hunting today, guys. And we have someone who was previously a product manager HQ founder, previously a principal at Pair VC, an entrepreneur turned founder, turned VC investor, turned founder again, and is currently the co-founder of immi. Kevin Lee, thanks so much for joining the show.
Thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate the time.
Oh yeah, super excited. As I just told you previously before we hit the record button, I'm really excited about this conversation. So let's just jump right in. And I know that the first question we always like to start off with is, how did you get into VC? But I'm going to give a small qualification here for you, Kevin, because I know you're a great communicator. When it comes to your journey moving into venture capital, what was the circumstance? What was the circumstance that pivoted you or forced your hand to move into venture capital? And what were the reasons why you said yes?
That's a really great question. So I think from, as you know, from my background, I was actually previously more of a product manager. I think it sounds like you were, also kind of in that field of project management, and you have done a lot of work there. So for me, I had spent my previous career a few years in product management at a few different companies. I was at a company called Kabam, which was mobile gaming. And then I moved into education tech at a company called Altschool. And it's funny, ironically enough, it took me a few years of working in the product management industry, as well as starting, even like an education, media company around product management called Product Manager HQ. All of these collective experiences helped me realize that, frankly, my personality type actually lended itself much better to a role that was, I would say, more external facing, one that, rather than be always with your team, working on one project, working on one product launch, I was much more extroverted. And so while you can be somewhat extroverted as a product manager within your organization, the truth of the matter is that, you're not going to be out and about grabbing coffee with people outside of the organization all the time. That would just be pretty detrimental for your team and for your product. And it took a lot of kind of just deeper soul searching in a way to basically come to this realization, like, hey, maybe I should explore an opportunity that, again, is more external facing. It could be sales, it could be BD, it could be venture. And I think that was when that exploration first started in the first place. And so I think you had asked, like, what was that kind of forcing function? And for me, it was really just this very, just kind of one of those, like, you wake up, you realize, hey, maybe I'm not fully 100% aligned with this career direction if I were to go product management all the way, and just move all the way, become a director or a VP or a chief product officer. Maybe that's just not fully aligned with who I am as a person. And so,
well, let's just sit on that for just a second, because I wrote a couple notes down here. I love writing notes about this stuff. So you were in product management and you started out in mobile gaming and you spent some years there, but what I really loved is that you've already told us that you recognize that you're an extrovert, you love going external, you love having those conversations. And my first question immediately is, within the product management realm, I mean, there's product management from building a product. There's also product management and product sales, product marketing. So there's a lot of facets for external opportunities to sell, have conversations, grow the network, grow a customer base. And so I'm curious, why didn't you stay in product management? Give us a little bit more details around that, because from what my understanding in the product management realm, I mean, there's a lot of latitude, there's a lot of spectrum there. And so what really was it that said, hey, you know what, product management isn't the place, the category, the market that I want to be. It's got to be something different, like VC. So tell me more about that.
Yeah, I think that's also a great follow-up question, because what I just listed were very much like, that was kind of hey, this is my personality type. But I think another deeper understanding the deeper understanding of my personality type is that what I realized when I was in product management, of course you're always in service of your users at the end of the day. But I think for myself, I was probably a little bit, I would say, too sensitive to trying to be in servitude of our users. And I think as a product manager, you're going to get so much feedback, so much different feedback from all of your different types of users. And a lot of times I felt that I was a little bit too reactive versus I think a good product manager is able to take a step back and, basically just ask themselves, hey, what is the user really asking for?
So having that reaction makes you a good VC.
Arguably it should, because I think as a VC, you're effectively, it is a servitude business, right? So, each of the founders that you're working with, they often have different requests the other day. They often have different needs. You're effectively acting almost as an advisor, not just a partner to them. And so, you have to be there for every single possible need that they might have, every request. You got to pick up the phone call. And I think that, again, it lends itself better to my personality than, for example, in product management. In product management, you may have to consciously ignore a subset of your users, knowing fully well that what you're building is for the greater of the whole. Or, if, for example, at alt school, we had a lot of teachers who oftentimes were making very specific requests, thinking that product change was what was going to help them, when in reality, if you listen deeper to what they were saying, it was actually, something fundamentally like we had to take a step back, we have to protect the entire app. And I think that was difficult to swallow, because what you're effectively doing is you're kind of pushing off the short-term needs for the purpose of the greater whole. And so, you had to recognize that. And that was a little difficult for me, because I was always like, look, I want to make sure that you're okay. I want to make sure you're okay. I want to make sure you're okay.
And that makes a lot of sense. If I can interject here, it makes a lot of sense if I begin to put some of the pieces together, especially, if you're a venture capitalist. Let's go to the end game here. As a venture capitalist, you are really able to really focus in on that investment team. It's not 9,000 users. It's a founder, maybe a co-founder, and a couple other leaders and a couple developers. And so for you, I think that really lends your personality to say, hey, I can really invest in this investment. I can invest in this team and not have to serve the whole and try to serve the whole. But if I may, I would take a gander and say that your website, Product Manager HQ, was an outpouring of your desire to want to help the greater product development community.
It was
Trying to reach everybody, but you still had this yearning for more kind of individualized, support. Is that fair?
That is actually absolutely correct. And that's a very, very astute assessment, actually. The philosophy I've tried to take for most of my life is just, it's teach everything you know. And I think Product Manager HQ, you're absolutely correct. It actually started out as a way for me to bundle everything I was learning on the job when I first broke into product management, and just start to casually write about it, give friendly advice to people. It was actually ironically a way to scale my advice, because I'd been doing all these coffee chats with all these people who were cold reaching out, and I said, look, I frankly just don't have enough time for this.
I knew it. I knew you were the type of guy. I knew that you were the type of guy that gets a shit ton, excuse my language, a ton of inbound, and you try to respond to each one of them, don't you?
Yeah, it's really difficult. It's really hard. And I'm assuming you're of the similar stature, and that's how you're able to recognize it.
I can recognize it. I can recognize the character flaw. You desire to give too much, Kevin. I get it. I totally get it. Can I go back, because I did some digging. I'm going to cut you off.
Yeah.
On January 15th, 2018, you tweeted, "Don't prove yourself, improve yourself." Do you remember saying that?
Yeah, I think I do. I'm trying to remember the particular situation in which that what caused to that, but
it was a great quote. No. Actually, there was I searched above and below. There wasn't really any context. I think that was just your free flow of your personality. And you just said, teach everything you know, which I love. I love this idea. And on January 15, 2018, you said, don't prove yourself, improve yourself. And I think so much of what you're talking about here is a story of self-improvement And
Mm-hmm.
through that self-improvement, you found opportunities for greater opportunities for as an outlet for your personality. You said, hey, I want to go wide. Well, going wide is tough with product management HQ. I want to go
Right.
smaller. I want to go more focused. And you're an entrepreneur and you're a venture capitalist and entrepreneur. So tell us how that
Mm-hmm.
worked out as a previous principal at Pear VC, and how did that move you into where you are today?
Yeah. So Pear Ventures was it was an incredible opportunity. Before that, I was actually at another venture firm called Funders Club, which was an interesting hybrid of a VC and a startup. So Funders Club was actually, this is really hard and very meta, but they were a VC that went through Y Combinator effectively as a startup, and then they ended up raising money from VCs themselves. So they raised from first round, Andreessen, a bunch of folks, and
What a scam.
anyways, hard to explain, but they were trying to be a full stack VC in a way where, you know, they were building out, for example, so we had a venture team, we had like a software engineering team. They were trying to build tools to help on the diligence and the sourcing side. So very interesting firm, and love that experience. And but what they did was more so seed and Series A. And I think you know, at the core, I was yearning to focus a lot more on the earliest stages of building a company. And you know, you may think, oh well, seed, that seems pretty early, doesn't it? But you know, you've probably known that in the Valley these days, given how everything has shifted, even seed these days is like, you know, company already has a decent amount of traction, perhaps, maybe has some revenue figures. So Pear was really an opportunity to move again to more of the pre-seed. So what Pear has really coined this term like the soil stage, because they think the soil is what lays the foundation to grow like a pear. It's a fun little, but for them, you know, they have really codified the steps it takes to go from 0 to 1, including kind of like how they work with founders, you know, how they would recommend like they basically help founders avoid certain missteps. The analogy was kind of like when you watch a horror movie. After you watch enough horror movies, you kind of know like, oh, you probably shouldn't go there. You probably shouldn't split up here.
Patterns. You see the patterns, right?
It's just the patterns. And so again, going back to like this desire to work at the earliest stages of building a business where it's typically just 1 to 2 founders. They're working in a garage, you know, maybe no full-time team members yet. And they're just really just struggling and pivoting to figure out how to get to a product that resonates with, you know, a core group of users. And
and that's so much, exemplifies really your personality to give. I wrote these couple notes down here. I said, you love helping, and you love helping early you love, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but if I'm filling in some gaps here, you love helping people get off the ground. Like you enjoy the process of the grind, the 0 to, okay, we're just getting some traction. We're just getting there, right? And I know this because I've listened to your podcasts, that you were on. You were on the Transparent VC on episode 5, May 18th, 2017. And I guess you were still principal at Pear VC. And you were talking about the most important question in the beginning stages of a startup. And you said the most important question that you ask is, do you really want to raise venture capital?
That's correct.
And I have to ask you, I wrote this down. Do you still believe that's the very first and most important question when regards to, you know, guys who are just starting a startup is, do you really want to raise venture capital? Walk us through that logic and help us understand a little bit more as to why that, to you, at least in 2017, was really the most fundamental question.
So it's funny, you know, I think now that I've crossed back into the threshold of being a founder, we recently also raised our venture round, and definitely a much stronger empathy for the founder side now, especially, you know, folks who are raising venture capital. I think even looking back, I don't want to say I cringe a little because I still actually believe in that question, but I can also now see how potentially pedantic of a question and that could be, given that a founder is already sitting across from you. They've already made the decision that they're probably, you know, they want to raise venture capital. So in hindsight, probably wouldn't ask them, you know, when they're sitting in that meeting. But I think the direction of which we're, you know, what I was trying to get at and the insights I was trying to, you know, to derive from that question still pertain and are still very relevant. And the reason for that is because I noticed this, especially when I was at Funders Club, where we were talking to a very high volume of companies every single week. You know, you talk to, say, 5 companies, you know, 5 to 6 companies a day, you know, over 5 days, that's, you know, 20 to 30 companies, or 30 to 40, it's quite a bit of companies that you're speaking to. And a lot of times these founders, you'd ask them some very basic questions, and you just come to this realization that they were really on this, follow this herd mentality, and it was simply because, let's say these were a bunch of companies coming out of like Y Combinator, for example, very prominent incubator or accelerator
Right.
here in the U.S. A lot of these folks, they came into the YC because they said, oh, this is like a badge of honor. This is really, really cool. I get to put YC15 next to my Twitter handle. And then they go to demo day. And maybe this company had no intention of raising, like a $4 million seed round, which is huge. But instead, because they looked around, they said, oh God, like all my batchmates are raising money. I should probably do the same because there's demand. There's going to be investors at demo day. All of my YC partners are telling me, hey, you should probably raise more, raise now while you still can. And I just noticed that a lot of these founders, they would just slowly, like in the beginning of the program, they'd say, no, I don't really want to raise money. At the end, all of them were like, nope, we're going to raise 2 on 10. And then we're going to increase the tranches to, and then we're going to raise 3 on 20.
Oh yeah,
and
that FOMO.
The FOMO is so strong. And I get it. It's so hard when everyone else around you is doing it. But I think, you have to ask yourself, are you willing to get onto this VC treadmill, right? So like there's like that running joke. I think there's a TechCrunch article that says venture capital is one hell of a drug.
Yes.
And it's true. It's one of those drugs that in certain circumstances, depending on the type of business, you may need it. So perhaps you are in an industry where it is somewhat commoditized. Your product is not super defensible. Maybe you're in an Uber and Lyft situation where raising the most amount of money gets you to a certain flywheel effect where, then you can acquire drivers more cheaply, which means that you can, riders will get rides faster and cheaper. And so you create a flywheel that then compounds. Understandable, certain types of businesses require that. But then again, you look at some of these companies in the public markets today, and I wouldn't say they're being crushed. They're still billion-dollar companies, but you can see that the public markets are now starting to get smarter. They're starting to understand, hey, wait, maybe raising so much venture capital is not the path to go. And I think I've extrapolated that one way too far to
I think it's perfect because everything that you just said really aligns, and I'm holding you accountable. I think it's important. No, I think part of the theme of VC hunting is really digging into the untold stories and are those stories still true? Or are your feelings, are your thoughts still true, or have they changed? I think it's important that it's okay, and it's important and it's okay for us to look back at these things. Now, what I really liked, Kevin, is that everything that you just said basically is a more mature way of what you said back in 2007. Because I wrote the notes down here. I got the notes down here. I mean, it is important that these basic questions are understood. You talked about that previously in 2017. You said, hey, it's important for them to be able to be concise, like understand and have that within, number 2, within their context of thinking. Like if you're going into an incubator, you're going to accelerator, you're going into some sort of pitch, VC funding should be within the context of your decision matrix. And so like to not be, I think you kind of talked about this here. I think a lot of entrepreneurs in the beginning of the game, they say, no, I'm not interested in raising. They're not interested. I think you can agree with me here because they don't know jack. They don't know anything about it. And so once they really taste the Kool-Aid about it, I think they get sucked into it. But lastly, I think this is really important that you talked about, is that VC funding and getting into the VC game, serious business. It's a serious circuit, man. It's not something that you can take lightly. And I know that you have enjoyed teaching that through product management. You enjoy teaching that through podcasts. And so this is another way for you in terms of simple questions and being able to answer these simple questions of really weeding out all the people that you had to interview, right? Five people a day, right?
Correct. And I think it's 100% right. Yeah.
Yeah. So you haven't changed that much. And so in terms of your venture capital experience, here's a pivot question for you. What do you think in terms of your experience has really helped you succeed?
It's weird. My co-founder the other day, so my co-founder, his name is also Kevin. And I think we really picked each other because we have very complementary skill sets, but we also have complementary personalities again. I would say, while he can be extroverted, he's probably a little bit more on the introverted side. He focuses a lot on more of the internal kind of operations, setting up our supply chain. We're a food CPG company. It's a little bit different than software. I have focused a lot more, again, on more of the external facing functions. So a lot on the fundraising, hiring, and now switching over more towards like a CMO type role. Why I give you that context? So I think in the beginning when we started working together, we had worked together around 8 years ago, but not to the extent where we are now, where we literally see each other 24/7, all day, every single day, like co-founders should. And he one day just told me, he said, "Look, Kevin, I was thinking about it, and we've been working together full time for, probably it's only been 5 months, and maybe like 6 months next weekends before that." And he said, "I was trying to understand why you get along so well with other people, like strangers, investors, advisors. How are you able to kind of build a relationship with them so quickly?" And this sounds very fluffy in a way, and I'll kind of dig in deeper. But he said, one thing you do very well is that you keep an open heart. And when I first heard that, I said, well, that could mean anything. That's kind of like the follow your heart, follow your passion type like mantra. But I think the more I thought about it, the more I understood what he was really just saying, like, it goes back to always being, not afraid to like give to people, or not afraid to, give people the benefit of the doubt. And I think it's so easy to be cynical, especially as you get older. Life happens, things happen to you, people maybe that you trust, maybe things fall apart. That's just a natural part. Life can be transient in a way, but I have always strived to keep an open heart and give people the benefit of the doubt. And I think when you do that, you give yourself more serendipitous opportunities to build relationships with people, because instead of thinking like, oh God, like, why do I want to spend time with this person? They're just going to like, we're going to have a few hangouts. We're going to fall apart, in a few months. It's not worth it. I think taking the opposite of that mentality, always being open-minded about people and their intentions and incentives and whatnot. I think that really has helped help me succeed in a way, because it's helped me get along with people, build my network very, very quickly, and also just help people understand that I don't have any ill intentions, or there never is a desire for like a transactional relationship or anything like that. It's just the type of person I am. I'm a very open person, as you can tell.
I love
always
it.
trying to be in service, and so yeah.
I mean, I feel blessed that you're willing to serve me and willing to come on this show.
No, vice versa.
But I was so hoping, man, I don't know if you saw my face or my emotions, but I was so hoping you'd move to relationships, because that's what I wrote down as the answer to this question. And the reason I know this is because on December 22nd, 2017, I dug, man. You said on a tweet, you said, meeting a late stage VC for the first time at any event. Me, quote, how's it going? Late stage VC, quote, oh, you're in early stage? Have any hot portfolio companies looking to raise that you can send my way? And you said, why would you build any kind of relationship this way? Everything you said oozes your personality, your character, your integrity, how your philosophy of mind, having an open heart. And right here, you used the word right there, relationships. And so for you, relationships is not only crucial to your success, but you'd probably even go farther and say even more. So tell us, why? Why are relationships so important in the VC world? And why would you not want to start a relationship this way? That's crazy that they'd say, oh, you're early stage? Well, you my funnel, please, right?
Totally. I'm glad you brought it in this direction. And I think it also pairs well to your original question of like, why the forcing function behind, venture. And I think, a lot of people, it's funny, a lot of people will oftentimes ask like, hey, Kevin, I'm thinking about moving into venture. How do I prepare in the next 2 weeks for a bunch of VC interviews? And I tell them,
you send them to your FAQ page, because you've answered that question 1,000 times. I know it, right?
It's funny. Well, that too, but I would say more importantly, it's one of those like, hey man, look, or woman or friend, if you are trying to prepare for a VC interview in the next 2 weeks, I can tell you that you've already failed. And I think it's a tough, very critical answer, but to me, the business of venture, it is a relationships business. And so if you have not been spending your entire life trying to build relationships in a very genuine, authentic way. Trust me, when you enter the venture industry, it's not going to work. And I tell you this because it's not just me. It's not just anecdotal. You can look at some of the best venture capitalists from the past decade. All these people, some of their best investments came from the strongest personal relationships they had, either when they were a founder, just an operator, an executive, or maybe just even in the VC world. But you can read. Yesterday, I was reading this article about Benchmark. They're like 5 partners, equal partnership. They have no fancy website. They have no fancy platform or services team. They're just individuals who have very strong relationships with other people. And you can read this. There's an article on Forbes about them, but I think it talks about like Peter Fenton and says like, oh yeah, he just he knew this founder who had just exited his company. I brought over like Hortonworks or something like that, and he was working on something new. And Peter said, well, okay, in the next 24 hours, we're going to give you a $30 million term sheet. We're going to bet on you as a founder because I know you. I've known you for a long time. We've worked together. We've been friends for a long capacity. I trust you. I've seen the work you do, and I don't really need to do any more diligence than that. And of course, I wouldn't recommend not doing diligence, but there are certain circumstances, especially in the early stage, where that's so key. It's this relationship, it's this trust you've built, and it's also why this can be a whole other conversation. But it's why I no longer believe that venture can be an automated industry, one that can be driven by software, that can use data. I've seen so many pitches over the years.
Oh, wow.
Even myself at Funders Club, we were trying to use a lot of data, but I think you can never automate with AI or whatever, because the human-to-human personal relationships in this industry are so important. It is a trust that can never really go away, and it's so hard to quantify that.
You are speaking my love language, Kevin Lee. You really are. I don't mind telling my ideas to the world, because who cares? Someone might execute and make something awesome. But I actually had a venture idea where the first name that came to my soul was gut investing. And it was a terrible name. But the whole premise of gut investing is this aesthetic, this thing that you're talking about, this relationship nuance that you're talking about that cannot be automated, cannot be seen with data, and cannot be seen on a spreadsheet. It is the gut. And the gut, and I wrote this down, gut plus relationships over time, or relationships over time gives you the gut instinct of, you know what? I've spent 2.5 years with this dude or this lady. Like, I know her. I know her disciplines. I know her behaviors. I know what gets a rise out of her. I know what pisses her off. I know what inspires her. I know what motivates her. I know what just brings her alive. Like, and what she's talking about, this idea she has, it's completely within the wheelhouse of what I know. And so I can make a gut investment. That's what the stupid name that I made. I can make a gut investment. And part of the whole idea about this gut investment idea was just documenting like what helps you understand that gut? Like what helps you rise to the point where you can say, you know what? I can do all the paper diligence in the world, but my gut tells me that he is going to the moon. Right. And I think that's what you're talking about, is that relationship over time, and being certainly where you are in the foam of it all out there, out west. I mean, certainly that time and experience is worth millions of dollars. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, definitely. I think funny story too is when I first met your brother, I think we had gotten to know each other over a certain number of months, and I was just so astounded, obviously, by his personal character, everything that he stood for. And I see that in you too, even just from a brief conversation with you. But I remember at the time I was at Funders Club, and I think he was still working on Pinpoint at the time. And I remember going to my team and saying, look, this team, like, I know John, they don't have traction. They don't have the typical traction requirements that we would need from a seed stage company. But look, I believe in this guy, and I think we have to invest. And despite that, we couldn't get there because of the traction requirement. But I remember that was actually a pivotal moment for me where I was thinking, well, God, I need to move into even earlier stage venture capital, and like why I should move to Pair, because there are so many people like John where I built a relationship over time. I know in my gut, these are the people that we have to back. And I was limited at the time, but even now, for example, some of your current investors, like Eric Vaughn, Ash Russ, these are people who I've built relationships. I've been very friendly with them over time, and I simply just told them like, look, both of you, you have to meet John Zaddington. Just great person. Go meet him and his brother. I didn't know you at the time, unfortunately, but they went and they met him and they saw the exact same thing, right? And I think that's why I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about this on here because maybe we shouldn't list some of your investors, but you know,
it's all right. Actually, those investors have come on the on the show,
awesome.
And so it's okay. You can name them. Yeah, they're on the show.
Awesome. Well, I think the main thing is like they also built a relationship with you guys over time, and they saw what hopefully I saw as well, and I think that's why they were so eager to back you guys. And that's just what this industry is all about. It's a very relationship driven industry. Yeah.
I love it. I love it, guys. If there's anything that's quotable, and we're going to be obviously quoting some of these awesome quotes. Kevin, you've provided some really great quotes here, but I want to pivot and I want to talk about ramen. Okay. Here's something really, I think, special. On May 13th of 2016. So we're going back, guys, 4+ years. On May 13th, 2016, Kevin Lee, you tweeted, "Soylent is people." Hashtag HustleCon. Now, was this the beginning ruminations? Was this the beginning thoughts of the food industry, the food world, and now how we're culminating to this weird, wacky introduction about ramen? Please help the listeners and watchers know, what the hell am I talking about? Soylent is people from May 2016 to ramen today. What am I talking about, Kevin Lee? What's going on?
Yeah. So that tweet, I believe I was at HustleCon, which is it is a massive event. I think they've now moved it to Oakland, but it started out as like a non-technical conference for basically non-techies and people who wanted to start companies, but maybe weren't technical themselves. And I think they maybe have switched a little bit where now they have some speakers who obviously are technical. They've gone so big. But at the time, I believe the Soylent founder was speaking, and it was, I need to check. I want to make sure it actually was the Soylent founder, unless it was someone who told me about Soylent. But
I think it is the picture of the Soylent founder that you got up there. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, you know, Soylent is kind of this ironic name because it's based on a movie from way back where you find out, plot spoiler at the end of the movie, that Soylent, you know, the food that they're all eating is actually made out of people. It's one of those grotesque, like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening type moments. So it's funny that you mentioned that. For some reason, that even flew by my mind that I even tweeted that a long time ago. But I think
it's a very meta and like deep at the same time. It's like Soylent because this guy is Soylent, and then at the same time, if you know what you just talked about, Soylent is people. It's very dark. It was very dark.
It's so funny because Soylent back in the day, it had a great rep when it first came out as like, oh my God, this is like a new kind of power food for, you know, people who don't want to think about food, and you can get all the nutrition you need. And I think today, you know, people are starting to recognize that some of the ingredients perhaps are not as healthy as they proposed. Some of the bars are selling maybe not as nutritious as they could be. Granted, I still think they were innovators. They still did amazing things. I think they have some things they can kind of definitely flush out from a formulation standpoint. What you mentioned around ramen, for some of the listeners who don't know. So now what my co-founder and I have started is a food CPG company. The first product we're making is we're actually trying to reinvent instant ramen, which is a $42 billion market that no one really pays attention to. It's, you know, historically always been deep fried, high in carbohydrates, very, very high in sodium, dominated by, you know, 3 incumbents, basically all Asian conglomerates and public companies, who've really owned the industry for the past 40 to 50 years with no incentive to change any of their formulations. And a lot of people often ask, well, how did you move you know, from software tech,
That's the
VC,
question.
and why are you doing this? Like,
why
would you do this? Was it Soylent? And you know, it's so funny because I would say I myself probably was an eater of Soylent. I would say around like 8 years ago. You know, when I first moved to the city, I heard about this and I was like, oh great, like now I don't have to cook anymore, and I can eat this food. Of course, I think I cared a lot about the convenience at the time. I didn't really understand the nutrition piece as well. But I want to go back further than that. So a lot of people don't realize this, but I come from a family who comes from the food industry. So my grandparents are actually farmers in Taiwan. They've been farmers for many decades now, and they grow something called a rose apple, aka a wax apple. So it's a fruit that's typically native to the Southeast Asian regions.
That's cool.
My family's from Taiwan. So a lot of my childhood, frankly, was actually in the field, kind of picking, stemming, packaging fruit with them. And my parents probably ironically immigrated to the U.S. so I wouldn't have to grow up in that industry, in the farming. But now I'm coming straight back to it.
That's how
So
it works.
that's
Back to your roots.
everything comes full circle at the end of the day.
That's
But
so funny.
but yeah, why we started this, I think a couple of things. One, a very, very strong personal mission around this. So despite families being in the food business, Asian families in particular, the Asian demographic has a very high propensity of diabetes and high blood pressure. It's a lot of people don't realize this, but 60% of the global diabetic population is actually Asian. It actually has something to do with the way we store fat. It's called visceral fat, and it basically gives us higher insulin resistance, and that leads to higher chance of diabetes. TMI, but it's not just prevalent to the Asian population. It's frankly in the U.S. diabetes very, very high rates. It was more that we drew inspiration from seeing our own families go through this. So my grandma's pre-diabetic. Both my parents have high blood pressure. I have a very high likelihood of developing type 2 diabetes, maybe yourself as well. Okay. So it's a common thing for a lot of people. And my co-founder and I took a look at this and we said, well, look, we have a history in the food business with our families. His dad runs an Asian supermarket in the US, and his grandma used to run a noodle stand in Thailand. We have 15 years combined building tech products, which arguably very, very different, but hopefully gives us a lot of the processes and prioritization methods, a lot of the frameworks, infrastructure to build in this industry, which is a lot more analog, less digital. And then third, we have this very strong personal mission around this because it has directly affected our families. So the hope is that, not just for our families, but also for our future generation, where it's a systemic issue in our population. Can we break that cycle? And a lot of that comes with diet, right? It comes with the food you eat. So we really set out about a year ago to start thinking about hey, can we build, first of all, there's a lot of macro trends pointing to Asian food in general, but we actually said, well, look, we want to build better for you Asian American food, an Asian American food brand. I think if you look at the typical Whole Foods, you look at the Asian aisle, it's pretty outdated. You have dozens, if not hundreds of brands that we love, we grew up eating, but a lot of them use the same ingredients. They're typically, again, higher in sodium, not much nutrition in some of these sauces.
Are you telling me that I can get really crappy food at Whole Foods? I thought when I enter into Whole Foods, I only buy Whole Foods.
You probably are. And again, I don't want to, it's always tough because, Asian food actually is pretty healthy. I would say a lot of the
Americanized version is just.
Exactly. It's the Americanized versions. And I think that's where, you hit a lot of issues where it's highly processed and, again, even in Asia, a lot of the foods now have become a lot more westernized, and so that's become an issue. But we're working on a better for you Asian American food brand. And again, the instant ramen that we've created is we've created a low carb, high protein, and higher fiber version. All of which was meant to help combat diabetes and high blood pressure. Obviously, it needs to taste as good as what people remember because you need to have that craving, and food is taste at the end of the day. So the taste and texture have to be there. But we've really formulated with food science PhDs, culinary chefs, and we've made this version that's plant protein based and much better for you. So
it's so interesting that you've decided. And holy cow, I didn't know it was a $42 billion industry. Now you had me perk up there. But it's really interesting that you're addressing an industry that has been, I would say, outdated, but it hasn't been updated in a while. Let's put it that way. And what's really interesting is that we generally lack the food education side of that. And so you're addressing which is fascinating to me because I know that you love educating, you love helping, you love encouraging people, you love helping people level up, you love people learning new things from what you know. And so what's interesting with this building this ramen is you're building something that you don't necessarily have to be educated on. You can just eat it and know that it's coming from a healthy place. But I'm assuming as well that you're going to be giving a lot of educational tidbits and a lot of educational information and context to help people begin creating and having a better healthy lifestyle. Is that fair?
Yeah. And I think you know me so well, despite only this short period of time. It's funny, our company mission actually is enriching people's lives through food. And that can be broken down into many different factors, right? I think one is you want to enrich health, and that comes naturally from the nutritional profile of the foods we create. We also have a value prop of focusing on low carb because we know that's really important for the chronic and health conditions we care about. The second that you already touched on is enriching food education. And I think that's part of the breaking the systemic cycle of helping people understand, like, even my own parents, my mom doesn't even know what a carbohydrate is. When I told her I was working on this company, I was like, oh, we're making low carb, food products. And she's like, what's a carbohydrate? And we went, I remember taking her and my dad to an Asian grocery.
That's awesome.
And we walked down the aisle of actually the noodle section, and I took a package, I flipped it, and I said, look, Mom, right here on the nutrition label, this is what a carbohydrate is. This is what it does to your body. This is how it converts to blood sugar. This is why, certain, grandma probably, she's pre-diabetic. She eats a lot of white rice, a lot of white noodles. And it was an educational moment. Same thing with things like MSG. I actually had to teach my parents because they've been inundated by the media that MSG is bad for you. When in reality, the reality is there's so much scientific evidence that that's not true at all. MSG is a naturally occurring glutamate that you can find in tomatoes, Parmesan cheese. It's the umami taste, and there's so much around food education, not just like removing stereotypes, but also just helping people improve their nutritional habits. That I think we have an opportunity to do with this company. And then the last thing is enriching perspectives. So I think why we chose to do Better For You Asian American food. Part of it is also because that is part of our heritage. It is uniquely us. It is uniquely a business that only myself and my co-founder could have started, given our ethnicities. Right. And it's an opportunity for us to share the foods we grew up eating, the foods we love, with people in the U.S. who,
that's cool, man.
Now I would say now Asian food is super popular. It's the number one. Even like Whole Foods, they release their top 10 trends every year. And last year, number one was the rise of Asian flavors. But it's an opportunity to enrich perspectives because people will eat this food. They'll say, "Oh my God, this food is delicious and it's healthy for me." And maybe I had a stigma against it. Maybe I had a misperception about it, but that can be broken through food. And it's one of those universal languages where you could sit anyone down at the dinner table, give them food, have a conversation. And then as a result, they now have an enriched perspective. They may even want to travel and go out to Asia where they wouldn't have done before. You're bringing them out of their comfort zone. So again, enriching people's lives through food, something we're super passionate about. We're very, very excited to do this with immi. Starting again, like you said, with instant ramen, which is a globally loved, globally nostalgic food.
What's after ramen? What are you going to conquer next?
Yeah, funny thing is, within instant ramen, there's so much room for expansion there. You look at some of these public companies like Nissin, a Japanese public company, the OG maker of the cup noodle. They make something like $3 billion a year just selling cup noodles and different flavors of cup noodles. There's a lot of room we can grow there. I think moving forward, though, we've looked into, for example, like
yakisoba.
Maybe a little bit too far. We've thought about like refrigerated frozen foods. So, for example, we created a proprietary flour blend, and we can actually make like a low carb, high protein dumpling. We can make, I think like have you ever had a Pocky snack, like the Pocky sticks?
Yes, the Pocky, man.
Yeah, we can make a low carb, high protein
dipped in chocolate, man. Dipped in chocolate
with lower sugar. So there's a lot on the confectionery and snack side that we can improve. But I think the vision is one day you walk down your typical either natural, conventional grocery store, you go to that Asian aisle, and all the products, you can see the immi brand covering all of those products where people go there, they trust the brand, they know that these products are going to be better for them. They know they're going to be low carb, certain nutritional benefits.
That's awesome.
That's the goal, where we have that. And perhaps we are even able to bring a lot of our flavors to other categories in the supermarket. So think calamansi flavored yogurt, guava flavored protein bars, right? Nice. So we're building out our supply chain in Asia right now. We're finding all these new innovative ingredients that are good for you that people aren't aware of. Can we bring that to categories in the supermarket? So super excited to do that.
This is so cool. I'm going to have to cut you off because you're making me so hungry. And it is about lunchtime on my side. And these awesome. Are the types of things that thank you so much for sharing, Kevin. And the reason is because these are the types of stories that I want to bring to the world. These are the stories behind the stories, right, of venture capitalists, VCs, entrepreneurs, so that people can see that, hey, you're more than just a billboard. You're more than just a tweet. You're more than just what I saw on this conference or this pamphlet or this website, right? There really is depth. And I love that you've been able to explain to us the personal reasons why immi in this new adventure with ramen and beyond is what you're doing. So I want to pivot to a final question to finish us off. And I'm going to give you some context here. You wrote a Medium post back in September 25th of 2017. It's titled "The 8 Actions That Led to the Biggest Life Impacts." You had 10 there, or 9 there, which was really interesting. I'm going to cover 2 of them, but then I'm going to ask you the question on the third. So 8 actions that led to the biggest life impacts, a Medium article from September 25th, 2017, which covered your 2016 to 2017 transformation. Number 1, you said getting official mentors and meeting them regularly. Now, I think you could probably go on for ages as to why that's important, and we already talked about it a lot in terms of relationships and the value of relationships. Number 6, you said taking extreme ownership. There's so much stuff there. So I know that I'm going to definitely have you come back and talk about getting official mentors and taking extreme ownership on our season 2. So you're on our inaugural season right now. So you're going to get invited back already, Kevin.
All right.
But I want to ask you about this number 9. You said, I don't meditate. That's the final question of today's conversation. Why the hell don't you meditate? It's just like, there was no explanation. It's like, I'm not into meditating. What's up with that, Kevin? What's going on? You hating on the meditation?
That's so funny that you bring that up. At the time, I think it was one of those, like, I had heard it so often from so many people, especially here in Silicon Valley, where it has become one of those things where, it is preached everywhere. There's apps around it, Calm, Headspace. Look, I have nothing against meditation. I think plenty of people use it extremely effectively. I think it's a great way to calm the mind. I have not historically had much success with it, and part of it could possibly just be I have not dedicated enough time to it. So it could perfectly well just be that I'm 100% at fault here. I've never been, I've never, for example, found the need for it. And I think part of the reason is because I have an amazing girlfriend named Josie, who I talk to every single day about all of my problems. I tell her about what's going on in my day. It is therapeutic for me, and is a way for me to get out of my own mind and get all these things out, which I think for a lot of people, meditation is very important for them in that regard. So I think perhaps I have unnecessarily transferred a lot of this, my pain and suffering, to her, when I should just be keeping it in my own head and letting it dissipate. But I think that's one of the primary reasons. I wish I could give you a scientific reason as to why I haven't, gone more into it, or why it hasn't perhaps worked for me. But I think that would be faulty, because I think if you put enough time to anything, you can probably find a way to make it work. So I have not taken enough extreme ownership over meditation. And I guess that's just because I haven't prioritized it enough. So never really an excuse. Right?
And for everyone out there watching and listening, we're not hating on meditation. I was just curious. It was the 8 things that helped him improve. And then there was this shadow, that number 9, it said, I'm not into meditate. I don't meditate. That was it. So thanks so much, Kevin Lee, for being on the VC Hunting podcast. It's been great to have you here. I'm excited that we're going to have you on season 2. Can you say yes? Can you say yes to that?
Awesome. Yes, definitely. Thanks so much for having me as well.
Absolutely. Guys, thanks so much. And we'll see you on the next episode. Wow, guys. What a conversation that I had with Kevin Lee. Oh my gosh. It was such a inspiring conversation. I mean, I love meeting people like Kevin. I love meeting people like Kevin Lee. And maybe it's just because, guys, that Kevin Lee and I are built similarly. We love to give. We love to communicate. We love to communicate what we know. I have him quoted here, right? Teach everything you know. And here's another quote by him. Venture is a relationship business. Like, that's what I'm all about. I'm all about relationships. I'm all about helping people. I'm all about growing people. So I love this conversation with Kevin Lee, and I hope you guys enjoyed this conversation as well. There's a couple things that are really, really just stuck out to me is his desire, or his moving into venture capital and then moving back into being a founder really is a self journey of discovery of how to deploy his skill sets, how to deploy his experiences, how to deploy his passions. And I think this is very meta for me to look at, but I think Kevin would agree with me here, is that really is a great example of how life should be led. Especially if you're led by your heart. If you're led by your heart and you're led by your passions and your desires and your natural giftings, right? Kevin is naturally gifted at educating people. He's naturally gifted at communicating. He's naturally gifted at a very powerful, empathetic, sympathetic, and situationally aware way of communicating as well, which makes for such a great package of empathy. It makes for such a great package of being able to communicate effectively to people because they know that you're not looking down on them when you're teaching them something new. And so this really was a journey for him of self-discovery. How can I educate more people? How can I help more people? And eventually, which is interesting in the journey of many individuals' lives, is it not? Is that we end up coming home, right? We end up coming home. And there you have it. Kevin Lee, who went from a product manager creating product management headquarters website to help everyone in the world learn more about product management, to going on podcasts like the, the Transparent VC episode 5, going on helping early stage seed companies start, to in the VC world, to being a co-founder, going back to his roots with ramen, and helping the world, helping people like me, pre-diabetic individuals, people who want to eat better, want to get educated in that. And as he clearly stated during the final moments of our conversation, he clearly stated that the 42 billion plus food industry is awaiting someone like him. Guys, I love having these types of conversations with inspiring individuals like Kevin Lee, and I can't wait to hear what recommendations he has for people to come and join the VC Hunting podcast, or the VC Hunting show, rather, with me. If you want to find more information about Kevin Lee and what's going on with him, feel free to find your way over to vchunting.com/Kevin-Lee. Thanks, guys. I'll see you in the next episode, we're going to have a rock star. She's awesome.